Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is to first and foremost have a great product. So making sure that the music is something that is special and that is going to stand out. And that can't be overstated how important that is, because if you don't have that, you can do everything else and you won't get anywhere.
Welcome to the Music Business Facts Podcast, where successful music industry experts share their industry secrets that will help you take your music career to the next level.
G'day music industry entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs. I stole that line from John Lee Dumas. Rodney Holder's my name, and thanks again for clicking on the play button for my show. I do really appreciate you spending your precious time with me, and as always, I'm striving to bring you the most relevant content that will actually help you achieve your goals of being successful in the music industry. So whether you want to become a successful artist or a manager or a songwriter or start up a label or get into publishing or whatever, or perhaps you're already in the business and you want to up your game to the next level, I really want to try and make my show the place where you come to where you can trust for honest, reliable and informative cutting-edge information. And I reckon today's show is going to be an absolute cracker for you, jam-packed full of educational content. You're going to absolutely love it. At least I hope you will. But before I get into that interview, I do want to share with you a great, awesome new resource that I'm giving away for free to reward all of my Music Business Facts listeners for supporting me. So like I said, it's 100% free, and you can check it out at musicbusinesslecture.com. As you may or may not know, I've become friends with a very successful gentleman named Andy Farrow, and Andy is one of my high-level mentors. He's probably most notable for his managing of bands like Opeth and Devin Townsend, some very successful prog metal bands. And he also has a string of really successful businesses across the entire gamut of the music business. He's very, very successful. He's got businesses and interests and investments in merchandise and publicity and PR companies and production companies. The guy's a real inspiration. And a while back, I hosted Andy at my TAFE college where I work, and I conducted a music business masterclass and filmed it. And I've turned that masterclass into free online mini training course. So I really recommend you go and check it out. Again, the link is musicbusinesslecture.com. I published the course last week, and already I've had over 300 people register for it, which is amazing. And I've also had a ton of people write to me saying how much they really enjoy the interview and how much it's really helped them with that knowledge. So again, thanks for everybody getting in touch with me. I always love hearing from you. And if you do want to get in touch, Rodney at musicbusinessfacts.com is my email. And just one more time, that lecture course, the mini course, is available at musicbusinesslecture.com. All right, and on to today's lecture. And people, like I said, I really think this is a real cracker. Tim Charles, he plays in an Australian progressive metal act called Neobliviscaris. And Tim is what I would call the epitome of a modern music business entrepreneur. I really believe that. I really think he sets a great example for all of us, that he's doing the types of things that most of us could and should be doing if you were serious about trying to have a massive shot at creating a successful music business in whatever realm that you're doing. And in fact, Tim's positioned himself to the point where he's pretty much performing every major role in the modern music business, every role that exists. So, I mean, if you check this out, he not only plays violin and sings in his band, but he's also a songwriter, he's a booking agent, he's an artist manager, he's a tour manager, he's a publicist, he's a business executive, he's a label manager, he's a concert promoter, he does artist liaison, he's a lecturer, he's a teacher, he does keynote presentations, he's a music consultant, he creates content, he's a social media manager. I mean, the guy just does shit, and that's the kind of thing you've got to do. You've got to get shit done, and that's one of the things I really admire about my guest, Tim Charles, today. And like I said, these are all the types of roles that I think most of you guys are going to need to undertake anyhow if you're serious about starting your own music business. Take, for example, if you were a musician. If you're not doing those types of things, if you're not controlling the business and setting the business up and doing the management and doing the publicity, in my experience, it's just not going to happen for you. No one's going to come and do those things for you when you're starting out unless you're really, really lucky. So you've got to do that stuff yourself, otherwise it just doesn't get done. And I guess the reality is that most people either think they can't do it, so they don't do it. And the message from this podcast is just have a go. Just ask people, listen to podcasts like mine, read books, any resource you can get, and have a go. That's really what it comes down to. You want to be a doer and not a gunner. So by undertaking all those roles yourself, you'll also become incredibly experienced in the business. So sure, you might make plenty of mistakes when you're doing things that you don't really know what you're doing. But believe me, ladies and gentlemen, like any business enterprise in the music industry, making mistakes is part of the entrepreneurial journey. And from those mistakes, you'll learn far more than you will from any book or course or podcast that I or anybody else could ever teach you. You've got to get out there and do stuff. So I always say that to my students. I can, present these interviews to you, and I can give you courses, and I can give you books to read. But until you actually go out and do stuff, that's going to be the best learning you'll ever do. Anyhow, I'll get straight to the interview because it's pretty comprehensive. Like I said, I'm really proud of this interview. I love talking to Tim because I just love watching what he's doing. And I'll speak to you on the other side of the podcast. And so until then, please enjoy my chat with the Neobliviscaris main man, Mr. Tim Charles. Enjoy. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Mr. Tim Charles, and Tim is a music business entrepreneur. He plays in a metal band from Melbourne, Australia called Neobliviscaris, and he's actually my second repeat guest. So you can go back and listen to my first interview with Tim way back in episode 29. I had a bit of a listen to it yesterday, and I sound pretty funny, but Tim, you were great. Tim, would you like to, for anyone who can't remember you or hasn't heard you before, just let people know a little bit about who you are and what you do? You do a lot of stuff.
Sure. I guess so. Primarily at the moment, I work as the manager, violinist, and clean vocalist for Neobliviscaris, and we are an internationally touring progressive extreme metal act. In addition to that, I've worked as a tour promoter here in Australia, working with international and local bands. I worked as a booking agent for quite a considerable amount of Australian rock, metal, and progressive acts. I run Welcome Entertainment, which dealt with bookings and management and promoting within Australia since 2007. And all of that stuff has been slowly a bit more condensed to that focus on Neobliviscaris, where I have been running the business element for, since 2003, but in particular as a full-time thing the last 2 years, including when we did a world tour crowdfunding campaign in 2014, which broke the Australian record for Australian music-related crowdfunding, and our Patreon membership campaign, which was the first of its kind in the world for a band, and currently brings in about just under $12,000 US per month, and on November 1st will tip over $200,000 US total earned since it launched in March 2016.
Tim, that is bloody incredible, mate, and that's the reason why I've got you on here. I want to have a good chat, and I want to talk about all that. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, though, you obviously are a music lover. You started playing music. Was there a time that you can remember where you said, I'm going to become an entrepreneur, I'm going to become a music business entrepreneur and get my hands on all of this stuff?
You know what? It was very much a bit-by-bit process.
Yeah.
Neobliviscaris, we hit the live scene in 2006, and we did a handful of local shows. And basically, I became a little bit frustrated by what I deemed the lack of professionalism from local promoters. I felt some of the shows weren't organized that well, and I thought, this doesn't seem that hard. I could do this.
Yeah.
And so when we did our EP or our demo launch in April 2007, our singer Zen and myself, we launched Welcome Entertainment, and we put on the show ourselves. And after that, I just decided to start helping out a few bands that were friends of mine, bands like, for example, Bellicle, one of my first clients. And then from there, I started becoming interested in helping bands that I loved, but I didn't know. And it was really that thing of, sometimes coming across bands who I felt their music was fantastic, but it didn't seem like they were doing that much. Or, I remember there was one band called Arcane from Queensland, mm-hmm. and I heard their music and I thought they're absolutely fantastic. And then they came down to Melbourne and played some really shitty venue, and really it was not a very good show. And I'm like, they shouldn't have done that show. That was a terrible option for them. They need someone to help them and tell them what to do. So I contacted them and said, hey, you should let me be your agent and I'll book your shows and your tours. And it was really just from that. So it was very much a slow progression. The other thing for me was, this is actually something I haven't really talked about very much publicly at all, but, back in about 2002, I got actually very sick with glandular fever, and I ended up with chronic fatigue syndrome. And for quite a few years, I was really not capable of holding down a normal job. And I was studying at university part-time, trying to finish my music degree, because that part-time was absolutely the most that my body and health could put up with. And it was kind of on the side that I started to do Welcome Entertainment stuff to earn a bit of money. And the reason I liked doing that was because it meant that I had control over my own schedule. So, I could get up when I wanted and do what I wanted, and I'd do my violin practice, and then I'd do some stuff for a few shows. And then it just really went on from there. Once I started doing the booking agency stuff, I then started managing a couple of bands. From there, started, putting on, festivals. Like I used to run Sonic Forge Festival, which was a big, a local metal festival in Melbourne. And I still run Progfest, which is an Australian, progressive festival, which we just announced actually just last week, because we've got Leprous Across headlining that next year across Australia. And, then I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll do a record label as well. So I started releasing a few things for a record label. But it was always from that thing of seeing other people doing it and going, well, I reckon I'm, as clever as they are. If they can do it, why can't I? And that's really been my approach for everything in life. I mean, it's been the same with Neobliviscaris, where, I would look at other bands up on stage and go, well, why can they do that but I can't? I mean, if I just work hard enough. And that was always the approach. Like, if I put in hard enough work, then maybe I can do those things that other people are doing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? I did want to ask you though, Tim, how did you learn all this stuff? Like, how did you learn about the industry and management and stuff like that? And then I guess things like GST and contracts. Did you just learn things the hard way, or use your initiative, or you got a business background?
I'm very much a musician that, became involved in business and not the other way around. So
yep.
It was, a lot of it was just working things out on the run. So I would book a show, and I would see how things went, and, trying to understand, how to do publicity campaigns and marketing and press releases and dealing with venues. And a lot of that stuff, I just would kind of work out, by trial and error. I mean, I would put on a show, and I would, put certain payment things together, and maybe I might lose $500 on the show, bringing a band across from interstate, and realize, okay, well, that didn't work very well. So I would, put that in the knowledge bank, and I would utilize that for the future. I mean, there were some people that helped me in those early days to get a bit more information on different things. I remember when I was very first starting Welcome Entertainment, I had probably a good hour-long phone call with Daisy from Soundworks Touring, who I knew because he had taken a bit of an interest in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to put on the first Sonic Forge Festival at the ESPY, and I was just trying to work out like how much I should pay bands and all this sort of stuff. I'm like, well, I don't want to insult bands by offering them like not enough, but I don't want to like overpay and like end up losing money. And, he was really kind enough to give me the time, to go through some of the things that I had in mind and the different bands I was looking at, and, offer suggestions on what might be, some appropriate, fees and things like that. So, I did have a little bit of help from people like that on occasion, but a lot of it was just me winging it. I mean, I remember there was a couple of times where I was looking at expanding into new things, like, for example, with management, trying to work out what were industry standard things in contracts, and I just got some books, got some music industry textbooks and stuff like that have whole chapters on management contracts, and I would just read them and go, okay, well, that's what apparently other people are doing, and then work out how to apply that to what I was doing. But it's been very much something where I've just kind of worked out as I go along from experience.
Oh, that's absolutely awesome, Tim. I mean, and that's the thing that, I did that exactly the same thing myself. I hit the books, and you learn from trial and error, and you get some mentors, and hopefully people listening to this podcast can get a bit educated as well. That's the whole reason that I do this, so that, the Rodney holders and the Tim Charles who are just starting out can get a bit of a leg up and get some insights into people like yourself who are at the coal front, and you're actually doing stuff. And that's what I love about you, Tim. I really admire how you're not only doing this great music, but you've got this great sort of business going on, this business sense. You were telling me before we got on to the call today how hard you've been working, and you got so many things going on. I mean, how do you balance it all, Tim? Have you got an assistant? Have you got people that work for you? Or are you literally just doing the 12-hour days or 16-hour days until you get the stuff done?
At the moment, it's just been me doing everything. But it's definitely at the stage where, I guess to go back a little bit, I've been in a little bit of a transitional thing over the last couple of years because, I've done a few different things. I was working primarily as a violin teacher after I finished university, and I was doing welcome entertainment stuff on the side, and I was booking an enormous amount of local shows, and I represented, I think maybe up to about 13 different bands across the country at one time.
Cool.
And so I basically had these two part-time jobs. I would go and teach, and I would juggle with that. And then as Neobliviscaris started to get a bit busier, I kind of started to slowly have less and less time to do local shows. I had to basically slowly wind back my booking agency. So now I actually don't represent any other bands except for Neobliviscaris, and basically I had to just focus on that. But basically in that process of trying to transfer from having that, I guess, good financial base of being a violin teacher, in amongst these other things, it was going, okay, well, I've got to try and work out how do I change across that financial base into doing all this music business stuff and performance stuff full time. And so the challenge with that, and I think that anyone who works in the music industry in Australia would relate to this, because there's not a lot of full-time jobs available.
Yep.
So, what I did was I saw the writing on the wall. I saw that it wasn't going to be possible for me to make any money being an expert on the Australian local scene anymore, because I was slowly, losing that expertise because I was on the road touring so much. Like Neobliviscaris in 2015-16, we were away touring at least 5-6 months of the year. And so it's not possible to be an expert in the local scene in order to put on the best shows when you're just not there. And the same with representing bands and all that sort of stuff. And that was something I really used to pride myself in. I was always at all the local shows, and I would really pride myself as being like an absolute expert on, the Australian, rock, metal, and progressive scenes, and exactly which bands could, pull what sort of crowds in each cities and how much money they're worth and which bands that should be touring with which and all that sort of stuff. But, there's different things that come around with different opportunities. And so because I was, off touring around the world and doing lots of stuff with international artists, I actually started basically winding up the work I was doing with Welcome Entertainment, with the booking agency and the local promotion, and instead started focusing on doing some consultancy work with Destroyer Lines, working with them for some of their international metal tours. Because I was like, well, I've done everything as a tour promoter on the local stuff, but my expertise now is going to be more likely to be with international bands, because those are the bands that I'm now touring with. I'm over in Europe at all these festivals, seeing 30 or 40 different international acts. This is where maybe my expertise could lie. But once again, it's not necessarily easy to juggle, all of these different things. And that was where, I did, some consultancy stuff for them for on and off for about a year. But not too long after the Neobliviscaris Patreon launched, it became clear that there really wasn't enough time to juggle all of these different things. And so what I've been now doing over the past, maybe 15 months or so is trying to consolidate that, all just with the management of Neobliviscaris and, running the Patreon and, booking full world tours and liaising with our record label and our booking agents around the world, and not just doing things in autopilot, but taking time to brainstorm and come up with creative ways to engage our fan base and to monetize the fans that we have, because that's one of the things that, I've really been trying to focus on. So for all of that thing, it's really just been a slow progression and a juggle of all of that. Now, because I'm about to go back on tour again, with the new album coming out October 27, and we go straight to North America on tour, and I'll probably spend 6 of the next 12 months on tour. That's where I'm just now been looking at that discussion of, okay, well, to keep doing all of this and to keep expanding what I'm doing, I'm probably going to have to start looking at getting an assistant, and maybe expanding what I'm doing, because what I do get asked about a lot is people, I guess, wanting to understand my approach to music business and especially artist management now, because what I'm doing is a little bit different to what a lot of other people are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to be able to share that expertise more and more, and to be able to work with some other artists in whatever capacity as well. But unfortunately, there's only 24 hours in a day, so that's always a catch.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I mean, as you know, listeners, I've been hassling Tim for a while. If you'd be interested in doing some lectures for me and for my audience, and possibly off of the back of that doing some courses as well, because Tim, what you are doing is quite unique, and I think it's quite groundbreaking. That's why I love having you on the show again. Just before we get to that stuff, because I want to talk about all that. I found, Tim, that when I was in my band and I was running my festival and managing my act and doing all that, it took a lot of time away from me actually being a performer, being a songwriter, being a composer, practicing my drums, all that stuff. Do you find that that's obviously the case for you, I imagine?
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult balance for sure. I think that I definitely get in different headspaces, and last year very much it was a case where we were doing a big North American headline tour, and I was not only performing as the violinist and singer on stage, doing a 80-minute show every night, like doing 26 shows in 31 days or whatever it was. On top of that, I was also the tour manager, running the tour on a 3-band package, with 2 other bands, so liaising with all the venues and doing all the advancing, whilst also being the band manager and, organizing all of the other aspects of the band's career, as well as having to get up and perform every day. And that's definitely a really difficult thing to juggle all those different things. And what I found was after we came home and we were done with our touring for the year, it was then trying to basically switch gears into that performing compositional aspect. And what I kind of found was earlier in the year, through basically February through May, really, is some of the business stuff got put a little bit to the side, just so that I could really focus on the new album that we were doing and put all my efforts into composing and writing. Mm-hmm. But as far as having a consistent balance between those two things, I haven't really found it yet. And that's actually one of the other reasons why I have been looking at getting staff on board, and something I've been talking about with my own band, to say, well, when we go away on tour, I'd prefer to focus more on performing. And so, like, on this upcoming US tour, we have we've invested the money in getting a tour manager, mm-hmm. which one means that you don't have someone that's juggling, so you're going to end up with a better result as far as how the tour is run when you have someone dedicated solely to one task. But it also means that, I have far less hours work to do while on tour, and that allowed me to get more rest and perform better and make the shows better, and that affects the reputation of the band and all that sort of stuff. So it's definitely a big juggle, and one that I'm still searching for. And I think really the key will be getting some staff on board to basically be able to delegate stuff at different times, so that when I'm home from tour, I can focus more on the business stuff and do my practice and other things on the side. And then when I go away, I can focus 100% on just being a performer and just, basically oversee some of the business stuff without having to actually do all of the grunt work day to day. Yeah,
look, I can totally relate to all that, Tim. Do you find it hard to let go of some of the control, to allow other people in, and all this stuff that you've been doing and running, to hand that over to them?
I absolutely do.
I know how you feel.
Like, I've been running the business side of Neobliviscaris, for like a decade. And, I think that one of the things I've realized is that, there's no one that is ever going to put in the same amount of work in regards to all of elements of the band than the people in the band. And so as much as it's good to have other people enlisted to be involved, at the same time, I'm also aware that, the level of a dedication or, some close to me might say maybe obsession to every little detail with the music and the recording and production and the mixing and the publicity and the all the advertising stuff and the music videos and the management and the tours and the supports and the online stores and all this sort of stuff is something that is difficult to put in someone else's hands. And there's definitely people who could do it, but they would take a lot more of the band's money than I need to, in order to make it worth my while. And so that's been another thing where, I'm happy to put in all that work, because I'm so passionate about what I'm doing. But I guess the other thing is just getting the right people. So one thing I have found was that trying to work out what things you can realistically be an expert of and what things are better to leave to somebody else. So, for example, it's actually much more beneficial to get certain people involved in certain areas. Like, as an example, today we announced our Australia-New Zealand headline tour for February, and I have someone employed as the marketing manager to handle the whole publicity side of the tour and all those little details. And I also have a publicist employed to handle all that additional publicity side of things. And then for me, I work as the promoter. And so I booked all the venues, and I'll handle all the logistics for the band and things like that. So in that way, I managed to save the band some money by doing some things for myself, but being also realistic about the enormity of the details that go into publicity and marketing campaigns for tours, and basically make sure we pay someone to handle that stuff, because I'm about to leave on tour in a couple of weeks' time. And when I do that, you just can't be focused on a million different details, especially when we also have the US tour. We also have European tours being booked, all these different things. So you do need to make sure that you have specialist people focus on certain areas that you can then oversee. But I guess it's that overseeing all of those overall elements is the stuff that I like to be involved in, regardless of whether I've delegated certain sections of that work.
Yeah, look, there's only so many hours in the day, isn't there, buddy? And I did see that you're presenting the Neobliviscaris tour, but you're also presenting it with David Roy Williams and Wild Thing Presents. Is that who you're talking about when you're talking about people helping you? Or I was curious why these people are involved when, again, Tim, you could do all this yourself, I imagine.
Yeah, but basically. So, I mean, the tour essentially has been organized by myself, on behalf of the band.
So you're ringing up all the venues, you're looking at the dates, you're going through the diary, you're doing the negotiations, you're booking the support acts, you're doing all the contracts, everything?
Yes. So I'm doing all that stuff. But essentially, we've been fortunate enough to have good relationship with other promoters. And, so I often work with Ellie from Wild Thing Presents on different things. And he has quite a close relationship with David Roy Williams as well. And so basically, there's certain different aspects of that, of all the marketing publicity things, that I passed off, for a fee to these people to make sure that everything is done at a really high level. And that's as well where, because I'm focused so much on the overall picture, you got to make sure that you're aware when there are other people who have more expertise in certain areas because they're doing it day to day. I'm not booking a number of Australian tours each year like I used to. And so making sure that you have people that are working with these media, working with different, marketing specialists or, all these different things is important to have so that you can, get the most out of whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. And I think a key word that you said there, Tim, which comes up a lot on my show is relationships. What would you say to the band? I can think of a number of bands that get in touch with me all the time through the podcast that they sort of say, look, we think we've got good music, we've got the work ethic, but we're actually looking for a manager. We're looking for help to get to that level that like you are, Tim, that you're doing these big international supports. And again, I would really encourage all my listeners to go back and to listen to episode 29 of Music Business Facts when I first interviewed you, because you talk a lot about this. But I just wondered, Tim, while I've got you here, if you could give some advice to any bands listening, saying, well, shit, how can we get these big international tour supports, and how can we do what you're doing, Tim? Any advice for someone listening?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to first and foremost have a great product. So making sure that the music is something that is special and that is going to stand out. And that can't be overstated how important that is, because if you don't have that, you can do everything else and you won't get anywhere.
How can you tell, Tim? Sorry to interrupt you, but I know with my band, you kind of knew when you wrote a good song and you knew when it had been recorded well, but really, in terms of other people enjoying it and liking it, you couldn't often tell until you either performed it live or released it and got some feedback.
Yeah, look, it is difficult, but part of that is by getting out on the live front and playing some shows and getting an idea of what the responses are like. So, getting up in your local venues and, trying to put on the best show you can and seeing what sort of reaction you get. I think that, it's very much a slow step-by-step thing, but it is, that reality that it's a lot of hard work to get, really good at something. In Neobliviscaris, everyone in the band has just spent thousands and thousands of hours practicing their instrument away from the then hundreds and thousands of hours that are available and used to rehearse as a band.
Yeah. You guys work really hard.
Well, and that's right. And it was many years. If anyone, saw us back in the day, when we first hit the live scene in 2006, we really weren't that good. We had some good songs, which we had one or two songs from back then we still, play sometimes today. But, the live performance wasn't that good. I really wasn't a very good singer. Some people who maybe are big fans of the band might disagree, but I really wasn't. There was a lot of elements where, the performance was pretty sloppy, but we had some good things going for us. But even at that stage, we took 3 years before we even played a show. And, our early songs weren't as good. They weren't anywhere near as creative. But what we did do is we put an enormous amount of hard work into trying to develop what we were doing. Obviously, I went and studied, a Bachelor of Music and Classical Violin Performance, and I studied composition as well. So, I had that sort of stuff in my background. And all of that, helped me get a firmer understanding of music and a better ability to critique, different acts. The other thing that can be helpful sometimes is also to get out and go watch a lot of other local bands, and also go out and watch the international bands that you love, and, take notice of the differences. It's still something that I do today. Where, I see some bands, from all around the world, and some bands I see, I go, what, we're as good as them, we're pretty good. And I think that we've matched what they're doing, but there's still some bands, like I'm off to see the Dillinger Escape Plan tomorrow night for the final time ever. And they're one of my favorite live bands. And every time I see them, I just get blown away by the intensity of their live shows. And, that feeling of, wow, I just can't imagine being that good, and it's the same when you see maybe a band like Meshuggah, who is like the tightest band in the history of the universe. And you just go, wow, I don't know if I could ever be that good at something, but you strive to reach those levels.
Yep.
And, but at the same time, one of the things for me was also just looking at the local openers supporting some of these acts and seeing what levels they were at, and go, okay, well, maybe we're not as good as that headline band from Sweden or from the US or whatever, but maybe if we put some work in, we can become on that local support level.
Yeah, totally.
I guess getting back a little bit to your initial question in regards to like the advice of what bands should do to make these things happen. I mean, I guess aside from, putting hours of practice into your instrument and into songwriting and into rehearsing with your band, the next step is very much taking the time to build relationships and to invest in every aspect of the band. So if you get a support opportunity with anyone, you might be opening for a few local bands at your local, pub or whatever venue. And, what you need to do is you need to turn up to that show and put on the absolute best show you possibly can. But not just that, you need to drag every single person you possibly can to that show. You got to make sure that you do everything you can to help advertise the show. You've got to make sure you drag your brother, your sister, your mom, your mates, friends, girlfriend. You got to drag all those people along to see you play and try to convince them, the promoter who booked the show, that you can bring a crowd. Now, as soon as you can convince the promoter that you bring a crowd, the promoter will book you again. It's really that simple, because a lot of promoters, they obviously want to book good bands, but more than anything, they want to book good bands that pull a crowd. And so if you can show that you can pull a crowd, I mean, on a local small level, that can sometimes be even more important than being that good, especially if it's an opening slot. Like if you want to win an opening slot on a show and you can bring 30 or 40 people to the show, there's a good chance you can get it. And it's just then, slowly building up from there and making sure you develop those contacts, impress the people that you're involved with local promoters, with other bands, develop those relationships with other local bands, try to get a bit of a buzz about you on that local scene, and then start, reaching out to the bigger promoters that are doing international supports. Make sure that you've got, a professional email together. Make it as short as humanly possible, because I know, being one of those people that, has done a lot of support, chosen supports for big international tours and stuff like that. I don't read long emails. I don't have the time. You get like 50 different bands submitting to be the opening act on a Melbourne show for, Tesseract or whoever. I mean, I don't have time to read 50 long emails, but I will read everyone in the gist of what it is there. And so you've got to make sure that you have key bullet points that is why they should pick you and how they can listen to your music and why you'd be a good choice in a most succinct way possible, and just slowly move on from there.
Yep, I love all that, Tim. And also, a lot of people on my show also say that if you're doing things that you've just talked about, if your music's good and you're working hard and you're out there playing and you're networking, then people are going to talk about you and your name's going to drop into those circles of all of those sort of key gatekeepers and industry players anyhow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, I think that we were really good at that. I mean, that was something where, this is back in about 2006 when we hit the live scene, and, we invested an incredible amount of time into promotion. Every time we played a show, we always would print up our own posters and flyers and be handing them around. We would be booked for a show and we might spend our own money printing up A6 flyers and then go along to whichever local shows or international metal shows were around, and just to hand them out at 1 in the morning when people were walking out the door. And we just spend our own money on that, even if we didn't have any from the promoter, just to make sure that our name was getting out there. And we were often spending a significant amount of time on online metal forums. And I mean, that's actually the way where how we got booked on Metal for the Brain all the way back in 2006, I think it was, which was the final one. Because, we were supposed to be opening for Nevermore up in Sydney, and, the promoter had stuffed up, the door times with the venue, and they had to move the door times back an hour, and we got cut from the show and we were literally already on the way. And I remember calling, Adam Aegis, and basically letting him know that we were available, and we were actually already coming up to play like a pre-show, Metal for the Brain party the night before in Canberra. And at that stage, we actually didn't even have a demo out. All we had was like a bunch of online hype from people that had seen our shows in Melbourne. And that was it. Like, no one could really even hear our music online. But basically we got booked on internet hype, and that was just from the incredible amount of work that we were doing. And then from that, we were really fortunate to get that opportunity. We basically just put ourselves out there and put our hands up, and we got booked on, which we were very grateful for. And then, Daisy from Soundworks Touring saw us play, at that festival, really loved what we did, and then shortly after booked us to open up for Suffocation not too long after that, which was in our first, proper international support. So, it's very much you just get one opportunity and then that can lead to another and another, and, you just got to keep putting in that work and grinding out until you get that opportunity to move up, and get those shows that will give you more exposure.
Yep, no, absolutely, and really, what you're doing, Tim, is you're creating your own lucky breaks, aren't you? Because you're there, and like you said, everything you just said is what's giving you those opportunities. So, listeners, listen to Tim, and it doesn't even matter what genre you're in. If you're listening to this and you're not a metal band, I think it's the same whatever genre you're doing. So. Tim, I could talk to you all day. Like I said, I listened to our episode the other day back in, episode 29. I laughed at my voice. I'm very, very robotic, but you were great. And we were talking about you doing your crowdfunding campaign, and that Neo were looking to raise $40,000. You smashed the Australian crowdfunding record for music, which was held by Eskimo Joe. They hit $60,000, and I think in the end you made $86,000. Is that true?
That's right.
It's amazing, mate. So that, was a really incredible feat. And then from there, you moved into what you really, I guess, in the music industry and the music business circles, particularly becoming renowned for, is your membership funding initiatives, which I loved how you said it was inspired by, Australian football clubs and your beloved love of the Doggies, who didn't do too well this year, did they, Timmy?
No, they didn't do too well. But as I said to my dad, who's a diehard Bulldogs fan, any time gets sad, about how they did this year, you can always just watch the Premiership DVD of the grand final from the year before. So,
well, that's right, mate. As a North Melbourne supporter, I'm still watching the '99 replays. Anyway, we'll stop talking about football. But no, your Patreon campaign, and for those who don't know, Patreon is essentially reoccurring crowdfunding where your fans, regularly give you money monthly. I looked today, Tim, and it says on the Patreon site, and I've got all this that'll be in the show notes at musicbusinessfacts.com, but you've got 1,099 supporters, and you're up around the $11,830 a month. I'm not sure if that was AUD or USD.
That's all in US dollars.
So you can add about 20% onto that, or 22% in today's exchange rate. That's amazing, Tim. That is amazing. And you said earlier in today's conversation, you've already earned over $200,000 from your fans. Yeah,
look, I mean, it's there's no way to sugarcoat it. It has been absolutely amazing. The US dollar amount works out to just over 15,000 Australian per month, and once we hit November 1st, it'll have ticked over to about 250,000 Australian that we would have brought in through this, ongoing, fan club membership initiative, I mean, it sounds like an extraordinary amount of money, and it is. I mean, anytime you manage to come up with an idea which brings in $250,000 over 18 months, it's definitely something that, you'd regard as a huge success. But I guess one of the things that has been really fascinating through the whole process is just, I guess, the reality of how much money a band needs to actually make it viable to do the band for a living. And
yep.
When you split up $250,000 over 18 months between 6 band members, it's actually not a huge amount of money, because people need money to live, and even if everyone was just on minimum wage, it's about $250,000 per year just to have 6 band members on slightly over what would be minimum wage full-time job. So it's definitely still a work in progress, but it's been going really, really well. And I think it just goes to show that even with that amount of money, and we're not quite, I work full-time just doing this band myself, but it's it's not quite at that level, across the board for everyone yet. That's, on that performing aspect. And, most bands, even at our level, even if they're making money on tours, aren't going to be getting that sort of money in across an 18-month period. You'd have to be just pulling enormous crowds in, Australia and, US, Europe to get that sort of money. And it just goes to show, how difficult the music industry landscape is at the moment.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And your drummer as well, he gave up a 6-figure job to continue on the band, because your story is fantastic in the video that you've done, which I'm going to, again, put on my website, which I encourage everyone to watch. Tim did an amazing presentation at Big Sound this year, and you were talking about how you basically had to throw in your jobs because they wouldn't give you any more time off work.
Yeah, I mean, it was just that harsh reality of, that it's hard to be a good employee when you're away for 6 months of the year. And, slowly, bit by bit, everyone got put in that position where it was either, either quit your job or wait till you get fired, or, and that was really everyone's only choices. And in between tours, we come back home and, everyone tries to find whatever extra work they can have. This year's been a little bit easier because we've been home for much of the year. So, a few of the guys, went back and got some other work that they could keep for a few months in a row, until then the album comes out, and then everyone will just get fired or have to quit again. But, that's the whole point of the Patreon now, and where we're at with the band. It is trying to take those things to the next level so that, then when we come back from these tours, we can just focus on what we're doing as artists and as musicians, so that we can get focused on, recording the next album and just doing all those sort of things, instead of having to split our focus, across, multiple different jobs.
Yeah, look, and one thing it stands out to me is the commitment from all of the guys in your band. So I think that for anyone listening to this too, you have to realize it's a big risk. I'm not sure how many people, when they're receiving a nice, comfy 6-figure income job, would throw it away to do music when maybe you got a mortgage to pay or a family to feed and all that kind of thing. So it's very admirable, I must say.
Look, it's definitely very difficult, and it does need a lot of commitment. And I think that a lot of Australian bands have always been in that situation where, it costs so much money to tour internationally, and you get to a point where you start getting offered tours, but to do that tour, you might have to lose $20,000 or $30,000 per tour, just because of the realities of how far away we are in the world, and the cost of flights and visas and all those sort of things. For us, this is always the way that I run the band from a business and management perspective. And that really was, what is in the best interests of the band's career.
Yep.
And the decisions made have always been based on that. So if we got offered a tour support, whether it be, just, supporting a band in Sydney or Perth or locally or whatever, or if it was an international tour or anything like that, it was, is this a good thing for the band's career? Is this a good next move for the band's career? And if the answer was yes, then my philosophy always was that we will just say yes and then find a way to make it happen. And that was really how the band has been run since, always really. But really since Citadel came out in 2014, and we got all that crowdfunding money, and we started doing these big international tours, and losing significant amounts of money per tour. And it was that thing of, I was continuing to plan further in advance than we had money for. And some of the guys in my band were a bit concerned about that. And I had a couple of guys, in the band, tell me that, look, I'm not going to be able to do these tours. We have to turn this tour down because, I can't afford it. I'm losing too much money being away all the time and blah, blah, blah. And I felt that really difficult to deal with, the prospect of having a tour offer that I knew was really good for our career and having to turn it down. And so that was really where, coming up with this membership initiative came from. It was that desire to not turn down good opportunities for the band. We had in the end of 2015, we had enough money to go back and do North America opening for Cradle of Filth. That was a tour offer that we had.
Yep.
And the only reason we could afford that was because we had an Australian tour before it, and we make money in Australia. So we were like, okay, well, let's just use the profits from our Australian tour to cover the money that we're short on being able to do this North American tour, and then we'll come back from North America and we'll have absolutely no money, but at least we'll have finished the world tour and we'll fulfilled our world tour crowdfunding obligations, and then we can see what's from there.
Yeah. No, look, it's awesome. And again, at $15K a month, it's obviously successful. I remember watching your video that you made when you were about to launch the Patreon campaign, and I can remember thinking, wow, this is look, I'm a big fan, Tim, because, being a music business lecturer, I'm always looking at new models and looking at ways to bring income into people's music businesses. But I can remember thinking, this is a big risk for these guys. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this pans out. And I guess I wanted to ask you, did you see that risk? Did you think, well, I'm really putting myself out here, and if this bombs, like we've already, we hold the record for the Australian crowdfunding campaign, and now we're doing this Patreon campaign, what happens if it bombs? Did that obviously cross your mind? I assume it did.
I mean, it definitely did, but it was less daunting than the prospect of turning down good opportunities for the band. And that's basically, I guess, probably, my honest response in regards to the way that my mind works in regards to the business of the band. I knew that at that time, we had an offer to do an extensive European tour with Enslaved, late in 2016. And our agent wanted us to do a headline tour through the UK and Scandinavia as well. And we just didn't have the money. Like, we didn't have any money to go towards that tour. But I really felt like Enslaved were a great band for us to tour with. There's not a lot of bands that are extreme but progressive as well, and they're one of the few bands that are like us. I mean, we sound different, but we both have extreme but progressive elements. And so it was a tour I felt would be really good for developing the band's fan base in Europe. So I really wanted to do the tour, and we all really wanted to do it, but there was absolutely no way to do it because we didn't have any money. Mm-hmm. And there was no way to get any money because we were also broke and in debt. Like, if we came home to earn money, just working normal day jobs, it would take ages just to get out of debt before we could even save up any money to go towards another tour. And so, basically it was just that desire not just to say yes to that tour, but the fact that, we had other opportunities that we were exploring as well. And we didn't want to turn these things down. The band was starting to pick up momentum. We really felt like we were getting somewhere. And the last thing we wanted to do was put on the brakes. But there wasn't any money. And we were looking at all of the different bands at our level, and none of them had that money. And lots of them were putting on the brakes at certain times to go and then save up money for a year or do another record and then go back on tour. And we didn't want to do that. We were like, people care about us right now. Let's keep pushing forward. Now, when I came up with the idea for it, it was very much then, trying to assess all of the different risks involved, trying to understand our fan base, trying to understand in what ways they've been receptive in the past to different types of, I guess, premium or VIP style content. Through the World Tour crowdfunding campaign, we learned a lot about what our fans were receptive to, the sort of content or packages that they were receptive to, and we used that to, I guess, inform what we did with the launch of the Patreon. But to be honest, a lot of it was just this leap of faith. I just had this real gut feeling that if we put ourselves out to our fans and say, this is the reality of the music industry, and all the other bands that pretend to be rich rock stars, most of them are fucking lying, and most of them are broke, and we're just going to be honest with you guys and put ourselves out there and say, this is our reality, and this is actually the reality of most bands in the music industry. And instead of breaking up or instead of canceling or turning down tours because there's no other option, we're going to say, well, we think that it seems a bit crazy that we've got, 70, 80,000 people follow us on Facebook and on Instagram and all these different things, and that these number of people wouldn't be willing to put in a few dollars in order to make sure that the band doesn't break up or that we don't turn down these tour offers. It's that thing of, and I just had it stuck in my head that, if I could contact all of the fans in Europe one by one and say, hey, we've got this tour, but we don't have any money, would you give us a few bucks to make sure that we could do it, but not just once, ongoing? that they would support it. And I think that the World Tour crowdfunding campaign was such a big success. It really gave us that faith that if we put ourselves out there in this way, that it would be successful. And there was definitely a bit of blowback from some people. Not everyone understood what we were trying to do. Not a lot of people understood that it's an enormous amount of work what we do in this band, and that it's not possible to hold down a real job. We had people having a go at us saying, why don't you just get a real fucking job and and save up your money like other people. It's like, well, we did that, but then we got too many tour offers and now we're all getting fired. And so we either just do, a tour every year, which is like what most Australian bands do, or we continue to tour a significant amount. But if we're going to do that, we need to basically form a partnership with our fans to finance those tours and our career in general.
It's just awesome, Tim. It really is. Like I said, I've really enjoyed watching you do it. I was a big fan of Jack Conte, who was the CEO of Patreon, and I sort of knew about Patreon before I think most people did, and you guys have certainly brought it to the forefront of a lot of people's minds, particularly in the heavy music scene here in Australia. Again, Tim, I've asked you this a lot. I mean, I would love to see you do some kind of coaching on this and some kind of course, because I'm sure it's not easy. My question to you is, what type of act can do what you've done, do you think? Is this something that every band can do? And if not, who can and who can't, and what type of acts do you think could do a Patreon, Tim?
I think that a Patreon in the style that Neobliviscaris do it is most suited to a band that is part of the international touring circuit and is looking to invest in the band more heavily. So if you're a local band and you're looking to do Australian tours and things like that, you might be more well-served trying to maybe crowdfund a specific tour or an album and getting a bit of knowledge on how your fan base reacts to such a thing. What we've found is that, you are essentially trying to attract your super fans to something like Patreon. You're not trying to attract your run-of-the-mill fans. Everyone who turns up to your shows is not going to jump on board. What you're trying to do is you're trying to attract people where you're one of their favorite bands in the whole world. Now, you got to be realistic about how many fans you have at that level that are enormously passionate about your band, so that they will invest financially in it and they'll see value in some of the stuff that you can then offer in return. So where I feel this is most effective right now, and this is, I say right now because this, I think, will change over time as the music industry and fans become more accustomed to dealing with artists in this way. I think that there are a significant amount of Australian acts who don't make as much money as people would think, but who are actually very big Australian acts. And I mean, people on the same level as Neobliviscaris, bands like Dead Letter Circus or 12 Foot Ninja or even like Northlane or King Parrot or all of these bands are bands that are very well known, but for their profiles they make less money than they should just because of the industry. They're all very professional bands or run very well, but the industry doesn't set things up in a way that it's really possible to earn significant amounts of money from the band. So for those artists, I guess on a similar level to us, are ones that could make that jump. There's other artists that maybe are a little bit smaller, but who are, on that international circuit, like, for example, bands on the level of, say, Caligula's Horse or someone like that, who could do very well at something like this because they have an international record deal, they have done some international touring, things like that, and they also bands at that level are able to then push these things in a way where it's not just to your local people in Melbourne or Brisbane or whatever, or even in your home country, it's to an international broad audience. And because if you're doing that international touring, then it is able to I guess, show fans across the world that they're going to be able to get something happening in return for what they're doing. Now, I guess on that, I guess what I think will happen over time is that high watermark of where you need to be to make something happen with something like Patreon will slowly go down. I think the more bands become involved. Really, like Neobliviscaris is really the only metal band in the world that is doing it at this level. You know, there's Elysian in the US who are touring with us in the US as well. You know, they have a Patreon as well. And there's a few, local acts here and there that have set them up, but there aren't any other significant acts. You know, even now, even after the $250,000 we've earned over the last 18 months. And part of that is because of the blowback that we got and Elysian got as well when they announced it, of people not really understanding the way the industry works. So it's a bit of a steady, ongoing educational process. But I think the main thing is to be aware that it's definitely something that you got to be investing in heavily in regards to the time you put in to make it worthwhile fans to get involved. And you got to make sure that you give them an ongoing quality product as a fan club, via your Patreon, so that they enjoy the experience and continue to be part of it, and also tell their friends who might also be fans that they should sign up as well.
No, very, very interesting, matey. I did want to ask you, Tim, in your opinion, do you think it has in any way tarnished your reputation or your brand? Do you think there's any Neo fans that kind of went, this is giving me a bad taste in my mouth?
I mean, in an overall sense, the answer is a definite no. I mean, are there a small handful of people who don't support what we're doing? Yes. I mean, are there people who used to be a fan of the band and now aren't? I mean, I'm not sure if that's the case. I mean, you could probably count on maybe one or two hands the number of the people in the world who would jump off a band because of the way they finance their tours. I mean, I think that there was definitely some fans, for example, in the US who maybe weren't sure about it. And then, literally about a month or two after we launched it, we announced a US headline tour, and we made really clear the point that, this tour is being financed by all the money we've got through Patreon. So thank you for all those people supporting us. And as people start to see that connection, it's like, well, if you want to see us tour, then you got to be supportive of it, because the reason that we did some of those tours is literally because of that money. So I think that's something that people have become more and more aware of over time, and it's been that ongoing educational process. So if anything, I think it's helped us. It's helped further the brand of the band. I think more people are talking about the band than ever before. The band is bigger than ever before. We're significantly bigger now than we were even 18 months ago, when we launched this. And we've become a talking point, not just for our music, but for what we're doing in the music industry. It's something we get asked about often in interviews. Not everyone is interested in talking about it. Not everyone brings it up, but it's, an ongoing, discussion point that gets brought up in a lot of interviews at the moment. Just people kind of wanting to find out, more information about, what we're doing, because we are, I guess, kind of almost like the outliers in the music industry for the metal scene at the moment.
No, you sure are. You're like the avant-garde, and I wouldn't say just for the metal bands. I think for many acts, I think my perspective, Tim, is that most of the other bands who see what you're doing would love to do what you do, but they just are they don't have the guts probably to do it. They think it might come across as a bit too desperate, and then they don't have that, like you said, they don't want to come out and be completely honest and say, you know what, we really are not making the money that we probably deserve, and we certainly, people think that we're making more money than we do, so they're still like living perhaps that mistruth that many bands live.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think that the reality is that, I mean, there's definitely bands who feel like they don't make as much money as they deserve, and they don't. And that's the reality with a lot of bands. But it is definitely a risk in regards to, bands putting themselves out there. And I think there's also that worry, people always have that worry if they do a crowdfunding campaign that, oh shit, what if this goes badly? Then it kind of tarnishes our reputation, because it makes us look like we don't have the support of our fan base, because you are literally putting yourself out there. You're going to say, hey, I'm going to just turn around and just fall backwards, and you guys have got to make sure that you catch us. But, I think with the Patreon, because it is such a, it is something there where there aren't a lot of bands involved yet, to really stick your neck out is to risk, getting that backlash. And for us, we had a little bit of backlash initially when it was announced from some people, but to be honest, we really didn't give a shit because there was so much money coming in, and the success of the project from a business perspective was so strong. So I was like, well, who cares if there's a few naysayers? A lot of bands have naysayers for all sorts of different reasons, but the reality is this kind of changes our lives and changes our career, and that's what's important. I mean, what I would love to do is help find another band, maybe, to launch a campaign on a similar level to ours. To show that it's not just Neo that can do it. I think there's quite a few acts, and I've talked to some acts who feel like, maybe it's just us that we've managed to kind of, pull this off, and maybe it might not work for their band, or, they've got whatever reasons in their head that they think maybe it wouldn't work for their band. But I think there's a lot more acts that it could work for than those bands realize. And, hopefully we'll be able to see, some successful campaigns, launch in the future, which then, might then start to open the floodgates a bit more for more and more acts to take this on board as something that they can realistically engage in. Yeah,
look, I totally agree with you. I spoke to Alex Webster from Cannibal Corpse about it, and I said, you guys could crush this. And I don't think he got it. He was just like, nah, I don't think so, man. That's not what we can do. So, I could totally imagine a band like Cannibal doing it, or, like you said, a number of other bands. But for people listening to this, I do recommend you go and check out what you're offering, because you work really hard on it. It's Patreon, patreon.com, and then / Neobliviscaris, and I'll have that link on the show notes of your interview here, Tim. Tim, you've given me an hour of your life. I know you're a really busy guy. Like I said, listeners, I'm also going to put up Tim's really great music business lecture he did at Big Sound last year. It's a fantastic lecture and a great insight to both Timmy's band and also what he's doing with Patreon. We've got the Neobliviscaris Australia-New Zealand tour coming up in February, and I'll put all those dates up as well as also where you can get the tickets. All this great stuff. Like I said, Tim, I could continually talk with you all day, because I do find you quite inspiring, and it's great to see someone working so hard and getting the results that you're getting. I guess just to finish the interview, mate, was there anything that you'd like to talk to my audience about, or anything that I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything I left out?
No, I mean, I think that the most important thing with everything, with any artist that is looking to do anything in the music industry, is, I think, to take responsibility for your own career. And I reckon that's probably just about the biggest piece of advice I could give to any band, because the reality is that it is enormously useful to your band to understand the way things work, and the way to understand is to get involved. So whether it's trying to book your own shows, or or work in the industry in whatever facet, the more you understand, the more it helps. And one thing I found was that all of my experience with Welkin Entertainment, working as a booking agent, manager, running my own record label, all these sort of things, the more I did with Welkin Entertainment, the more it helped Neobliviscaris. And then vice versa, they kind of, fed each other in a way. As Neobliviscaris got bigger, it actually kind of, made more people aware of what I was doing on the business side of things, and then gave more credibility to some of the things that I was doing. And so I think that even now, just that ability to do things and have that understanding yourself is just invaluable, so that you can make sure that the people that are representing you are doing a good job, whether it's a booking agent or a tour promoter or a manager, making sure that you've got the right sort of deals. Don't just trust that everyone is always doing something in your best interests. Always have, a healthy bit of skepticism in regards to the way you treat everybody, but do that in an informed way where you can instead make sure that you study and understand the industry, whether, even just by reading some books or getting a bit of idea of certain industry standards, so that when you come across these things, you're educated in the way that the industry works. And aside from that, I'd probably just listen to a whole bunch of these Music Business Facts podcasts, because I know there's so much amazing stuff on here. And even I listen to a few of them from time to time, because it's hard to get inside information from people working on a top level in the music industry. And really, the more information that you have, the better opportunity you give your band to not get screwed over and to get as far as possible.
Yep, absolutely. Look, that's awesome, Tim. I really appreciate all that, mate. And thank you for being so honest and coming on and giving up your precious time and allowing me to probe you and to get all this information from you and to share it with all the people who, again, I think the people listening to my show are a lot of them are metalheads, but a lot of them aren't necessarily. They're just trying to get an insight how to make it how to forge out a career and to not go hungry and be able to pay the rent from doing something that they absolutely love in this with this music. So, which is so wonderful. So, thanks again, Tim. I really appreciate your time, buddy.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And good luck with your tours all coming up. It sounds very exciting. You must be really pumped.
Yeah, absolutely. Very excited to get back on the road. And as much as I enjoy all the business stuff, and I really do get a lot of satisfaction out of all the business stuff, still the best thing is being up on stage and performing. So much looking forward to getting back to that aspect of the band. Awesome, mate. Well, I hope I can catch up with you and go and have a beer or a coffee or dinner or something when you come to Brisbane. All right. Sounds good. Well, there you have it, people. What did you think? Pretty inspiring, wouldn't you say? I would love to hear from you if you enjoyed my chat. Feel free to send me through any questions that you'd like to, comment on the interview or the show, anything at all. Rodney@musicbusinessfacts.com. And Tim, by the way, if you ever do listen to this podcast, I'm sorry, but I really stuffed up. I recorded this interview long before the Australian Neobliviscaris tour. And it's taken me so long to publish it that there's really no point in me plugging the dates. So I'm really sorry, mate. But regardless, now you guys have a great resource to go back and listen to. Tim, in my opinion, is probably one of the smartest and hardest working guys in the Australian metal scene right now. So, yeah, I really hope you heard the value that he just gave you, and so much really cool stuff in there. Anyhow, I also want to give you some great URLs now to remember. So if you're in the gym or you're washing the dog or whatever you're doing, then you might not remember all this stuff, but all of my stuff's going to be over at the show notes at musicbusinessfacts.com. You can just search for Tim Charles and it'll be there. So the first thing is that I think you should go and check out Tim and Neobliviscaris' Patreon campaign, because that's really impressive. It's bringing him in all of that cash. We talked about it on the interview. Go and check it out. It's at Patreon, patreon.com, patreon.com/Neobliviscaris. And Neobliviscaris is spelled Neo and Neo, Bliviscaris. Like I said, it's probably a bit difficult if you're just listening to me on the fly, but check out musicbusinessfacts.com. It'll be there. Tim also has a really awesome YouTube keynote lecture from Big Sound from a couple of years ago, which is a music business conference held here, and I really do encourage you to go and check it out. So jump on Google and Google Tim Charles Big Sound lecture, or I've put it also on my show notes. And Tim is also my second repeat guest on Music Business Facts, so he shares that honour with the mighty Dave Lombardo from Slayer. But if you do want to go back and listen to Tim's first interview, where we really focused on his band's record-breaking crowdfunding campaign, again, it's all on my show notes, and just type in Tim Charles again. And finally, don't forget to register for my free Andy Farrow mini course. It really is a great little master course in the music business and ways at making money. So you can go and check that out at musicbusinesslecture.com. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the show. I've really enjoyed being back podcasting and presenting this to you. I'm going to close, as I always do, with a quote. And today's one comes from Bill Gates, and I really love this one. And Bill said, "Most people overestimate what they can achieve in 1 year, but they underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I think that's very relevant for the music industry. I see a lot of people come in very passionate,
And when it doesn't happen for them in the first, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, they can get very disheartened and drop off. And if you want to win at this game, in my experience and my opinion, it's a game for long players. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So keep plugging away and doing what you do. And believe me, you'll get there. You'll get that success. You'll achieve those goals you've set yourself. So until next time, friends, Rodney Holder's my name, and I'm signing off for musicbusinessfacts.com. I'll copy you later, and I'll be back very soon with some more, hopefully, awesome content and podcasts and courses and stuff for you to get your brains around to help you succeed in the business. Till then, take care.
You've been listening to the Music Business Facts podcast. For more essential music business tips and information, visit musicbusinessfacts.com.